Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss productivity tactics that work for neurodivergent individuals.
Every episode, we interview guests with lived experience of neurodiversity who also have a solid productivity and habit game, and pass the learnings on to you, our wise and benevolent audience.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Joey.
I'm Joey, and I coach creatives to get moving on their most ambitious projects through the power of solid habits and strong focus. I'm also a perpetual student of psychology and perpetually on a quest to a one-armed chin-up.
And I'm Jeremy, a neurospicy software developer turned startup founder, building the Focus Bear app to help people with ADHD and autism thrive at work. My cool party trick is leaving parties early so I can get to sleep in time for my 2-hour-long morning routine. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. That's adults with both combined autism and ADHD. I'm Jeremy, I'm an ADHDer myself. I'm the founder of Focus Bear and also one of the hosts of this podcast. I built Focus Bear for myself originally because I was constantly getting distracted by my phone and my laptop. I wanted a way to tame my ADHD monkey mind so I'd stop going down rabbit holes and actually get work done, but also get off my computer and my phone in the evening so I'd be able to sleep properly. It's working perfectly for me and it's helping a lot of ADHDs as well. I'd love for you to try it. It's available for Mac, Windows, iOS and Android, and it leverages most of the productivity strategies we talk about on the podcast. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Welcome to episode number 70 of the Focus and Chill podcast. We're thrilled to be joined by Kristian Mikhel today. Kristian is a co-founder of Paper and Pain, a creative collective for good. He's also a PhD candidate at the University of Tasmania and an accessibility designer. He's been sharing his experience living and working with ADHD, advocating for equal digital rights and inclusive experiences, and helping products that benefit humans and communities. Welcome to the show, Kristian.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Lots of interesting things to dive into there from your bio. Let's start out with the living and working with ADHD part. When did you first realize that you weren't neurotypical?
Well, it's one of those things that in my case, I think is just a little bit complicated because I've lived my entire life without even knowing what I was dealing with. And I do write a lot about how being diagnosed as an adult is a tough thing, but it's made even tougher when you don't even know what ADHD is. I was diagnosed a little over a year ago, and that was all thanks to my therapist, like a third therapist that I think I've had, who was the first one who actually managed to just spot the symptoms and pointing me in the right direction, essentially nudged me to go and get assessed. And that, I think, was the only time when I managed to get an answer to a lot of the questions that I would have specifically around what was wrong with me. And what were the things that I was dealing with, which I thought were just depression or anxiety or stress. So it's been a little over a year, but also almost 29 years, I'd say.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where you and I were born in an era where there was less awareness in the schooling sector of what ADHD looked like. Do you think, looking back on it, that if you were a student today, would those signs have been picked up?
Look, absolutely. I do vaguely remember the distinction between ADHD and ADD, for example, and the whole conversation about this not just being a thing that children might have and something that is easy to deal with. So just the level of acceptance that I see those days, acceptance that it is a rather common problem, is something that a lot of people have to live with. It is something that needs to be diagnosed. So you can't just say that you have that and just roll with it. There are professionals specialized in it and people who can actually help you out with it. And I think that the fact that we're having discussions about it, the fact that we have podcasts that center around it, and people who are sharing their experiences openly, that helps a lot of individuals like myself who some 20 years ago would not even hear the words ADHD or ADD. And today, this is not stigmatized anymore. This has been widely discussed, and I'm really happy with where this is going, at the very least, in terms of the impact that it's had on my life. So,
yeah, absolutely. I'm very glad that there's less stigma and there's more strategies and more awareness. What was it like for you in terms of some of the challenges that you faced?
I think it all started with not being able to focus on a task when I was a kid. In as far as I can tell, I'd always been like that. And that was something that would drive my teachers insane, that would make my grandmother lose her mind over it. Just this task of making me sit there still for an hour and do a thing. It would take me forever to finish my homework. I would never be able to get a thing from like A to B in one go. I would always have to go and find something else for me to do and just stay entertained with before I can get back to the task. And a lot of things just be left unfinished. So living with that, I think it's always been dealing with inability to retain motivation and just stay inspired for a long time. That is needed, absolutely needed, when you complete jobs, any sorts of jobs really, that take longer than 20 minutes to finish. It's something that I thought was just a symptom of depression, which is something I've lived with and dealt with for my entire life. And someone living with a condition that manifests in anxiety, in mood swings, in essentially in your brain developing things like obsessive compulsive personality disorder, when you try and protect yourself from the manifestations of ADHD, but end up actually hurting yourself more. I would also use confusion as a keyword, because when you don't know what you're dealing with, this whole thing is just being exacerbated by that. You're just rolling in the fog, just hoping that somehow things will work out, and then it just gets worse and worse.
I hear you on that. The rolling in the fog is a great way to put it. Was it a situation where, despite the challenges with staying with one task for some period of time, you were still able to cope? Because I mean, you got into a PhD program, which makes me think you must have done pretty well at uni, and you're running a design agency. So were you able to work your way through and find your own rhythms and ways of working with your brain even prior to the diagnosis?
I don't want to be overly critical of myself. We did agree that I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be sharing things as they are.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I think it's a defense mechanism that you develop, constantly feeling that like you are not motivated enough, or you're just being bored with things. You can't concentrate on doing one thing at a time. And again, this is just the way it manifests in me. I know a lot of people are on the other end of the spectrum and they just hyper focus, right? In my case, the inability to retain focus could mean one of the two things. I would either lose it completely and I would never get back to doing what I was doing before that, or I would just rush things while I still have it. Like you light up a match and then you just wait for it to burn. And in my case, it's like I have a timer in my head that I can literally set and say, well, in 20 minutes from now, I will get bored of doing this. So I either finish it right now while I still have it in me, or I just abandon it altogether. So I can't say that I did good at school. Like I didn't do bad at school. I'm a straight A student. I got my bachelor's with honors, like master's with distinction, all that. But this is not because I was a hardworking student. I think I attribute a lot of it to luck, a lot of it to just like a lot of things that just collided really well together. And I could use the experience that I would gather in industry, just things that I would live through, and then I just like put them all together and apply them in my studies. But it was also this rush to get things done as soon as I can that on the one hand helped me achieve whatever I did achieve by now, which is not a lot, but I'm fairly satisfied with it. And at the same time, it kind of burned through me, which makes me feel like I've lived longer than I did.
Yeah, I can relate to the lighting a match. And I think especially with exams, that's a situation where that feels very familiar, of just feeling so much anxiety and awareness that I'm in a peak state and I don't know how long this is going to last. So I just tend to rush through them. And I think that often applies to my work as well. And like you said, it can result in getting stuff done. But for me, there was quite a personal toll to that in terms of my health. Was there anything like that for you? Did the rushing have any negative repercussions?
Absolutely. All of them really. anything and everything that I deal with, I attribute to that. And the only metaphor that I can think of is you're in a car and you're driving in a car really fast, and then you just have to apply brakes really fast. And if you act surprised that your car is not running well after you having done this for hours on end, just like pedal to the metal, and then you just drive really fast, and then you brake really fast, and then you just smell that something's burning out there. Like, this is to be anticipated, really.
Yeah.
And in my case, whenever I feel overwhelmed, and I find myself having those moments very often, whenever I feel like I can't breathe and I just can't really sit straight, I can't think straight, can't do anything, I have to force myself out of bed. I sometimes feel lost. Like, I start doing things and I just find myself doing something I can't remember. I picked it up, and why I was doing it in the first place is also lost on me. I would find myself in places like that. That would be a sign that something's wrong. I must take a break. I must actually rest a little bit. I think physically, it also manifests a lot. I'm doing my best to keep myself fit, but out of necessity for the most part. Like, if you don't do that, your body is also the one suffering. Like, your back and your knees are not supposed to hurt in your early 20s if you do things right. And if they do, it's a very good chance you're not doing something right. So any consequences that you can suffer, I think I have, beside, I don't know, strokes and heart attacks yet.
Has it gotten better after being diagnosed and having treatment?
It's the same as when you finally put on the glasses and all of those blurry blobs that you see in front of you turn out they're all humans and they have faces and you can actually distinguish one from the other. It's the same here. When you know what you're dealing with, it's sometimes as good as half the solution. Like, just knowing that you have an answer, you have a pathway to dealing with it, you have a choice. Like, you can choose how you want to battle it, and there are ways. You have a community that you either feel you belong to, or at the very least you can get some knowledge and wisdom from, you can turn to when you need help and support. You have people who are dealing with the same thing as you are. You have doctors who specialize in helping people like yourself. If that is not good enough for you to at least start your healing journey or dealing journey, whatever it is that you prefer, then I don't know what would be. So absolutely.
And you mentioned some of the strengths earlier in terms of the flip side of rushing is you have been able to achieve some impressive things. I think getting into a PhD program and masters with distinction is certainly impressive. What are some of the other strengths that you've been leaning into?
I don't want to frame those as strengths, because if we do, we will have to admit that live fast, die young is a good axiom to live by. That definitely isn't. And I would not encourage anyone to try and just do as many things as you can as fast as you can, because look, there's on the one hand so many things that you can do, and on the other, there's like, you don't really have that much time in general. Go and enjoy it. Don't try to rush and do everything as fast as you can, because you'll end up burning out much faster than you otherwise would. On the flip side, if I look at it from at least my perspective, right, I am getting better at selecting and handpicking things that I feel or know that I can stay motivated doing. There are things that I enjoy doing and I like doing. I started doing my PhD because I really wanted to get back into research, and I really wanted to focus on helping people. So my research is in air quality communication. I'm trying to work with local communities, figuring out how we might communicate pollution, how we might co-design solutions with people. I identified this little thing, and I think that people with ADHD, like myself at least, they could benefit from this need to have human connection and can leverage that to get their things done. Getting things fast also means that sometimes you get to do small things and you get to see some incremental progress. And if you learn to slow down a little bit, you can actually turn this to your favor. Like, for example, if you think of it as writing a book, You won't be just sitting there and writing a book. You'll be writing it one chapter at a time, which might give you a chance to actually reflect on it, go back and rewrite it one chapter at a time, and like second, third, fourth edit. So if you are patient enough, and if there's someone or something to keep you motivated, there's a very good chance that you will end up delivering something of high quality. And occasionally I manage to stay motivated doing things that require a lot of dedication, a lot of time invested in it, one step at a time.
Yeah, that makes sense, Kristian. You mentioned being selective about the things that you're working on. So you're not just trying to do everything. Could you tell us a little bit more about the work projects that you're concentrating on at the moment?
I guess you will have to define work, because everything in my mind is a job and nothing is, because again, it's a constant search for motivation and a little bit of stimulation, I guess, a bit of a kick out of anything and everything you do. I have a few things that I try to focus on besides the PhD that is like the bulk of my work right now. In every project that I pick these days is supposed to be, at least for my brain, to be satisfied with it, impactful and influential beyond just, as a designer, for example, you are taught that you need to demonstrate business impact. So it's supposed to be beyond just the business impact that you can show. So it has to be an impact on communities, an impact on humans or on people. I'm helping a few nonprofit organizations. I work with a couple clients who are building solutions in healthcare and wellness, and they're trying to help people like myself, essentially. So I'm trying to recalibrate myself into that direction and just know that, yeah, I might have too many things on my plate, but at least 70% of those things will actually keep me running for a while. And the rest of it, well, if I manage to finish it up fast, like I pick up an article that I want to get published, and I know why I need to finish writing it right now, because there's a project that I just finished. I need to reflect on it, and I need to write a sort of a summary and get it published. I'd rather do it right now while it's all still fresh and I'm still motivated. If I let it sit there and if I just sleep on it, I'll wake up and I never want to touch it again.
Yes, it's pretty interesting. Like, you've got all these things going on. You've also got a PhD as well. PhD, it's quite a significant undertaking. You mentioned before your awareness around like your motivation being a bit like a match, and it's going to burn out quickly if you don't get onto things. Do you have any other ways of balancing the PhD and the other commitments? So the match burns out, but you don't.
I pick up other commitments to balance out all the commitments that I picked up earlier. And then when that becomes too much, I pick up more, so that it's like, nah.
Doesn't seem like a good answer.
In all seriousness, though, again, please, whoever's listening to it right now, don't take this as an advice. I'm not the person you might want to learn from in terms of managing that. I do have this feeling that, I don't know why, it's just innate, that I don't really have much time and I need to maximize my outputs right now. And I need to do as much as I can while I still can it and while I'm still motivated, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow, the day after. But I'm also trying to acknowledge that there is life beyond commitments and beyond work, and that life tends to be beautiful. And that is the life that I want to focus on. Staying fit physically, one of the things. Go and work out, go exercise, go for a run, go for a hike, get out of home, a couple hours a day, the very least. That helps a lot, really. Reading is one of the things that I struggle with a lot when it comes to long form, like books that are 20% read on my Kindle is my bane. Out of 1,000 books that I have there, I just keep adding new ones. But I'm still trying to force myself to sit there, read through things that I'm at least interested in and keep myself entertained. I'm trying to find a hobby, and I kind of make myself just go out and try new things and different things. I picked up driving mostly out of necessity, because it's absolutely impossible to move around Tasmania without a car. But the last time I drove a car was like 9 years ago. So I had to start learning again. And that's quite fascinating. And I think the biggest thing about that is that it challenges me to get out of my comfort zone, which is just work and go and do something fun, and something fun that is, well, also a little thrilling and dangerous. Okay, yeah, maybe dangerous for others more so than for myself, but
I hope you're not applying the drive really fast and brake rapidly.
no, I stay like 10 kilometers an hour, or be like never go above limit when I go to a decent car, just so that I don't have to do that. And if anything happens, at least like that aspect of my life doesn't have to suffer the same way that every other aspect does.
Yeah, I find driving a little bit scary personally. There's so many amazing things to see in Tasmania, so I understand why it'd be great to be able to drive and also go to all the hikes and things like that. I was curious in terms of balancing it. I was curious about like logistically, how do you do it? Do you work 9 to 3 on the PhD, or how do you mix up the time day by day?
Look, that's a thing that I'm still trying to figure out for myself, because there's this aspect of novelty that you need to introduce regularly. Because if you just stick to the same routine, it's just going to get really old really fast, and you're never going to want to get back to it. And it may be working really well for you. Your brain just doesn't want to accept it any longer. So right now, what does seem to be working just fine is the routine where I spend X number of hours, usually a couple hours in the morning, doing my things for fun. So I make some coffee. I take time to, I don't know, crack some eggs or make some nice breakfast, lay it out. I find a nice series to watch, usually something that is good, entertaining, and fun. And then I allocate a few hours while I'm still in this cheerful mood and while I'm still full of energy, and when I take my medication, so that starts working, I allocate that to solving the biggest problems, which usually are doing the literature review. So I do a whole bunch of reading. There's a lot of time that goes towards research and development of my PhD. A few hours that go towards work and the burning problems that I have, with a little break for lunch. It's not like there's a strict routine, but at least I'm trying to maximize what I do in the first few hours of the day. The second part of the day after lunch is when I actually have to rely on certain tools like focus timers, just to make sure that I don't get distracted before the timer goes off, and I can stay on those routine mundane tasks that I have to complete. And there are some things that just don't really need my brain's involvement, so my brain gets really tired doing it. But if I set the timer, if I spend 25 minutes and my brain knows that there's 25 minutes on it, I just have to stick to it.
Yeah, it's good having those kind of techniques that vary depending on the natural level of focus. We were going to ask you about what you do in your off time, and you've already given us some ideas there in terms of the driving and reading and experimenting with new hobbies. What type of books do you tend to enjoy reading at the moment?
I have 5 or 6 different books that I'm trying to read, which is usually, and it's not a brag, it's a bane. If you anything like me, you would know that you're not picking multiple books to say, oh, I've read 25,000 books this month. It's more of like there's 1 or 2 that you have to read because, well, it has something to do with the type of work you do. Like I'm researching a certain topic, and there's this fundamental work from 1983 that you need to read in like a couple days, and it's 1,000 pages, and the only copies available in one library in town, and you actually have to spend hours reading through it, and then you have to go back and read the same thing over again because you can't understand what it says. When it comes to fiction, there's a variety of books that I'm either revisiting or I'm reading for the first time and I'm just enjoying it. There's usually one book that I read for fun. I just finished reading this Swedish novel about 100-year-old men who jumped out the window and disappeared. I can't remember the name, but I think the name goes just like that. 100-year-old men jumped out the window and disappeared. It's basically, as you could guess, about 100-year-old man who shares the story of his life. And it's just absolutely fascinating. And it's so lighthearted, and it's a really good read if you want to satisfy your brain. Like, this is what I do when I need to help like my brain feel a little better about itself. I give it something light, it finishes it, and I'm like, well, are you satisfied? Can we go on to something serious now? There's a few other books that I'm rediscovering from my favorite bit of literature, which is The Lost Generation. It's usually the authors who survived the First World War, and then they're just reflecting on the experience in their works are just the ones that are there for me to discover good literature time and time again, like Hemingway, Remarque, Fitzgerald, the authors that are just always there. I started reading Tolstoy recently because I somehow skipped it when I was in school. And now I feel like it is the right time for me to go back and rediscover that. There's usually one extra book that sits there with me that has nothing to do with the studies, and I'm taking too long to talk about books, but I'm trying to share that different books just serve different purposes. There's usually one, in my case it's usually Foucault, that is there for you to slowly and gradually meticulously read through for like months and months, trying to understand what it's all about, and then trying to apply it in your practice later if you ever can. So something like that. Yeah.
Love it. I've got a few books like that I gradually consume. Haven't read much Hemingway or Tolstoy recently, but I did enjoy reading them in my 20s.
Kristian, you mentioned the focus timers before. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you do to optimize your productivity during your work hours?
I don't optimize my productivity. And honestly, I feel like I've been doing the opposite because that seems to be helping optimize my productivity. Whenever I focus specifically on being productive, I end up doing the polar opposite of that. I end up being obsessed with the idea of just checking as many boxes as I can, completing as many tasks as I can, doing as many things as I can. And it's a question of quantity versus quality. And what's the point in having a really long checklist and being satisfied with the fact that you managed to cross out 25,000 items off of it in a day if the majority of those things are either small and tiny and don't really amount to anything, or just don't really have any impact on you? Sure, you can start adding things like do the dishes 3 times in a row, but what's the point? Are you not going to do them otherwise? Are you going to feel productive by doing it? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out what are the things that I like and enjoy doing the most. I enjoy doing literature reviews for the research that I do. I just enjoy reading all of those weird papers from weird people like myself, or researching those obscure topics that nobody really cares about. And then all of a sudden they end up being influential. You just discover them for the first time and you just like it. There's some interesting work. It goes really deep into it. I just focus on finding those little things. And I feel like that makes me more productive because whenever I get to discover something I enjoy doing, I don't really have to think about, oh, how productive am I today? By eliminating the things that don't actually have any impact on me, or just not doing things that I don't like, but that also helps being productive. It helps a lot. It doesn't mean that if I don't like vacuuming, I'm going to stop vacuuming altogether. I'm going to keep my place neat and tidy regardless. But if I don't like particular rituals in a day, or if I don't like some activities, I'm not going to force myself into it. And I'm going to substitute them with something that I'm going to enjoy. And that will eventually amount to me being productive. It's a fine line between productivity and obsession, especially for people with ADHD.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess you were mentioning that, hey, like the best way I'm productive is by not focusing on productivity. Could you tell us a bit more about or probably like your least favorite piece of productivity advice?
There's a big problem of people trying to break their tasks into smaller tasks. And that is a thing that we have to deal with. We people with ADHD, a lot of people that I spoke with, they would just dread those big jobs that you just can't really even comprehend unless you actually put in the effort to think about it and break it down into like granular things. But sometimes people go overboard with it. And I am not particularly a fan of that. I'm totally fine with separating one task from the other and going about it one step at a time. But whenever it goes too far, I feel like you spend more energy and time just maintaining the system rather than actually doing useful things. But my least favorite advice is something that's getting very prevalent in social media and in the tech space these days, is to use AI for anything productivity related, especially when it comes to optimizing your calendar, optimizing your to-do lists, or anything like that. I have no idea how that's supposed to be helpful. I have no idea how I'm supposed to trust a machine to optimize my meetings, rearrange my schedule for the day, tell me what I'm supposed to do right now. It's so problematic, and I don't think it has anything to do with productivity. And the second thing is, stop counting the hours. Stop counting the seconds that you spend doing task A or task B. In the end, what matters is, what are the results of all of this and how satisfied are you? Because there's no difference between reading for 60 minutes a day and reading for 10 minutes a day if it's a drag, and if it doesn't amount to anything in the end.
That makes a lot of sense. And we're going to take your advice right now, Kristian, and we're going to take a break of uncounted duration, and we'll be right back. Hi there, Focus and Chillers. Are you ready to supercharge your knowledge in the realms of creativity, tech, and psychology? Come check out my fortnightly newsletter. In each edition, you'll get quick wins and actionable takeaways that you can put into practice right away. If this sounds like you, I'd love to have you as a reader. Subscribe for your fortnightly dose of insights. The link is in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show.
Okay, we're back from our uncounted duration break, and we're keen to dive into some things that you mentioned earlier, Kristian, around your morning routine. You talked about making coffee and cracking some eggs, having a really delicious breakfast. What else do you do in your morning routine, which you vary from day to day? You said you get.
I'm trying to make sure that I don't do the same thing like twice in a row, or at the very least that there's a little bit of difference. Like sometimes my body would choose it for me and I would just wake up too late and we'll have to rush it. So be it. There's a lot of studies that would show you that your brain needs a puzzle. Like it constantly needs to challenge itself. So if you go to work, you would rather take a different route to work. Like one day you walk there, another day you just walk a different alley or a different path, or you bike there, whatever. And that alone might help your brain stay healthy for as long as it possibly can. And it also serves as like disease prevention for a lot of conditions that you might want to avoid. And I try to apply the same thing to my like morning routines or evening routines as well. So if I wake up and I have an avocado toast today, I'm not going to do the same thing tomorrow. I'd rather get some overnight oats or some stuff like that. Not an obsession with healthy food or anything. It's more about trying to diversify what you do, even if it's just a tiny little thing. Like you go to your favorite coffee shop and you get in yourself your favorite coffee, but have you tried a different coffee at a different coffee shop? Okay, maybe you do like the barista over there, so get yourself a flat white instead of espresso, or try matcha latte next time. You might be surprised with it. What I'm trying to do desperately, though, is I'm trying to reduce my screen time, which I really fail at. There's usually some entertainment going on, but just like a little bit. And that is like one of those few moments when I can actually enjoy watching something. Otherwise, it would be a book, or I don't know, no news though. That I managed to exclude from the morning routine, and I'm quite happy about it.
It's really interesting what you were saying around mixing things up helps to create new neural pathways, because there are a few ways of looking at it. One is, I guess, Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. I don't really like Mark Zuckerberg, but they both have this mindset that we want that diversity and variety in our day, but it also consumes brain power, and they prefer to save their brain power and their mental resources for things during their workday. Do you reckon that's a misguided attitude, and actually it doesn't really cost you more to change your avocado for oatmeal? It's not going to mean that you have less creativity throughout the rest of your day?
I don't have the scientific evidence to back any of the claims, but I see where people who don't want to make choices like your wardrobe choices come from. Like they want to optimize that aspect of their life and they want to buy themselves 25 identical tees and just wear them. Fine. They probably have a lot of other things that they have in their lives that are diverse enough. And it's not like they have the same routine. So to them, I think this is one of those resources that you can actually optimize for yourself. And maybe you could do that too. In terms of small things that don't attribute too much, I can't think of anything at the top of my head. But if you had 3 different types of oatmeal in your cupboard, but you just have 2 instead, I don't think this is going to change much besides you having to choose one in the morning, unless you get a kick out of it or you actually need all 3. Maybe it's a good optimization. To me, there are things that I like doing consistently, and there are things that I would rather diversify. I kept moving around. I haven't lived in one place for longer than a couple of years. I think the longest I managed to stay in like one flat was for 3 years. It was my semi-final stay in Singapore. And that was the longest, and I would get really attached to it. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. But changing your environment, changing the place you live, all the way to changing just tiny little things about your daily routine, something that does help you challenge yourself a little bit. You find alternative paths, you find creative ways of solving same problems. And it's also fun. Like you're missing out on so much if you do the same thing every single day. Kind of sad.
You were mentioning before you're being very intentional with your screen time in the morning. I was wondering, you probably have pretty good sleep. You're minimizing your screen time.
I wish I did. No, that's a wishful thinking. No, I I do not. Look, I'm afraid that, again, not really being that mindful as I wish I was, just having to deal with an overwhelming amount of anxiety, whether self-manifested or coming from different sources, is something that eventually leads to me spending much more time with devices and with like quick entertainment than I'd rather would. I guess in a perfect world, I would love to be in a state where I don't really have to sit in front of the computer all the time, or I wouldn't have this intrinsic need to just run to the screen and just stay super glued to it. I do try to get enough sleep, like as much as I can. Go to bed early, wake up early. I always fail at it. I always fail at one or the other, or sometimes at both. So I know what it's supposed to look like. So I'm really good at consulting people on how they should sleep. I'm really bad at implementing it myself yet.
Yeah, it seems simple. Just go to bed a bit earlier. But for me, there's always one thing that trips me up. And I'm pretty good. I go to bed by 9:20 p.m. most nights, but my goal is 9:08 p.m. And I haven't been able to knock off those 12 minutes. So I feel the challenge too. We're getting to the end, so keen to end by asking where people can connect with you.
Well, I guess I'm at the stage of my life where LinkedIn would be the place where you could find me spending most of my time. And I'm really sad having to say that LinkedIn is my social media of choice.
You're not an X person?
I'm afraid I joined Twitter a few months before the acquisition. And after that, I still have an account, but I don't really use it anymore. And that's kind of sad. And all the other social networks is just sort of dying. Facebook is for checking updates. At best, Instagram is for, I don't know, staying in touch with close friends who are everywhere, but not really much beside that. So I guess LinkedIn, there's my website where I have lots and lots of different links leading to lots of different places. But if you actually want to drop me a question or just chat with me, or if you have a job for me, that would be the place, I guess.
Well, Kristian, it's been wonderful having you on. Do you have any final words or asks for our audience?
Yeah, I guess I've discussed this topic a lot with some other people who do have ADHD or people who suspect they might have it. And I wrote about it quite a lot, which resonated with audiences on LinkedIn. I think it all comes down to 3 things, at least for me. The first one is stop being obsessed with being productive at all costs. And I don't mean to preach here. It's just one of those things that I think we collectively are now really obsessed over. In our tech is built to optimize our time. We are trying to maximize our outputs and everything, but you don't really have to do that. And sometimes chasing the goal of productivity instead of chasing the goal of the impact of your work on you and the others is probably not the right way to go about it. So maybe think about other things that are not checklists or calendars that could help you focus on the things you like doing. I think it's really important to be mindful of how you feel. And if you do feel like you're being overwhelmed and you can't really handle it, there are ways to deal with it, and you should ask for help. There are professionals out there who are available for free or affordable counseling sessions that you can book. I would urge you to get to that as soon as possible before it gets worse. And if you do need help, there's nothing wrong about it. And if you do notice that your loved ones, your friends, your family members, they might suffer from same things you do, which they just exhibit the symptoms, don't hesitate to refer them to specialists. It might be life-changing. There's nothing terrifying about it. And I was terrified of seeing a therapist, and I was terrified of seeing a psychiatrist for the first time. I thought this would change me, and it did in a good way. I don't know where I would be if I didn't. So I'm really, really happy I did. And I think the third thing is something that I'm wishing upon myself and the others as well, is sometimes it's totally fine to abandon things. Don't abandon puppies and don't abandon children probably, but when it comes to books that you don't enjoy, when it comes to jobs that you don't want to finish, and as long as it doesn't impact the others, as long as it doesn't negatively impact the others, you don't have to stick to a hobby that you don't like only because of sunk cost fallacy, because of number of hours you invested in it. And you don't have to keep pushing for the sake of it, because completion rate is not really a metrics in real life. No one's going to ask you how many jobs you completed, how many books you read, and how many tasks you managed to finish. Move on to something else. I'm at peace with my Kindle, with the majority of my books being 20% read. I don't know. I'm going to look out for the book that I'm going to finish. And one day I'm going to find one, finish it, and move on to another one.
Wonderful. And we'll wrap the show with that.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.